another slot for us.
Let's do this. All right, everybody. Welcome to the American Science Fiction and Fantasy Media Track. This is Family Dynamics and Sci-Fi. We're going to have a great time. To get some housekeeping out of the way, we would love it if you could donate to the Dragon Con charity this year. It's the Arthritis Foundation. Arthritis is the #1 reason that adults are disabled in this country, and it would be wonderful if you could help us out a little bit with that. Okay, I am Amy Chandler. I have a master's in counseling, and I no longer practice as a therapist, but I do have experience working with children and adults. And so now I am going to have the rest of my panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, I am Dr. Birma Gainor. I am the Director of Counseling and Psychological Services at Clemson University.
Hi, my name is Hanako M. I am the creator and host of the Fandom Hybrid podcast.
Hey guys, my name is Michael Collins. I am the theory prognosticator and dad joke aficionado of said Fandom Hybrid podcast.
All right, okay, so I was preparing for this panel, and I came up against a problem pretty quickly. I realized I was thinking about science fiction movies and television, and I was realizing that family as a happy, healthy unit is actually not really depicted in science fiction media. I could think of 2 examples with the help of Google. For television, the show Lost in Space. And then for movies, Black Panther was the first thing that came to my head, because this was another a movie that had family dynamics that were healthy. So my first question for the panel really is, what do you think is going on with that? Because science fiction can reflect fears, but it also can reflect a utopian existence. So the absence of family in science fiction, I think, is pretty interesting. So what do you guys think?
I think that there's actually too much time spent in causing quote-unquote origin stories, right? And so you have to have this conflict and you have to have these problems, and family of origin issues are the easiest thing to do, I feel like, almost, especially when you're reflecting in real life. When we think about practice, the first question I tend to ask students or people in my office is, so how's your family relationships? Because there's always a piece of that reflects on their problems in the current day. It's almost a joke, right? Like, it's just a easy thing to do that we spend a lot of time doing, and that means that we aren't reading about more idealized families very much, because how we get to this great conflict and the saving the world or whatever is not from health, it's from brokenness.
Yeah, so I think that part of the problem is when you're talking about science fiction and fantasy, you're talking about things with an otherworldly element, and there aren't many situations where you can deal with that otherworldly element where there isn't some type of trauma or special circumstances attached. And I think for a lot of science fiction and fantasy media, you just kind of pick up there with those dynamics, and then you kind of go from there with the storytelling. I mean, even, and I was thinking about what you said, even trying to figure out, like, what in the world would I talk about? Like, what families? Because I think one of the things that Kellen sent out was we were going to talk a lot about single families, single parent families, and I was just thinking about, like, for me, one of the shows that I really like that has positive parental and child relationships is Teen Wolf. And when you think about even that, even before all of the supernatural elements are added to it, there's still, like, you know, you have one parent who's dead from illness, you have another parent who is absent because of divorce. So I think it reflects a lot about our world, because you don't see a lot of, you know, intact nuclear families nowadays, but it just kind of, with science fiction and fantasy, you add a little bit of fantastical element to it.
Yeah, and also when you think about science fiction, you don't really think about set families. You think about created families. Like, you think of Star Trek and Star Wars, and a lot of the other science fiction, they have people that come from different backgrounds and different places, and they come together and they actually create a family that they never had. So it's really not discussed that much, because they try to you can kind of blame the writers because they want to have something that is more outstanding than just growing up with a mother and father. You have a lot of different people from different backgrounds making it more interesting as far as they're concerned. They'd rather do that as opposed to just have a standard family situation set up. So, I mean, there's that. And, I mean, I think some people just find it more interesting that people are broken as opposed to people just being together mentally and together emotionally. They think that broken people are more interesting. So what's the best way to break somebody than to break their family? So that just kind of goes from there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you have to have conflict, I think, in a lot of just media in general and the story so that you have something to overcome, something to fight against. And so it's, but I agree, most people can really relate to the whole, I mean, I'm broken. I've got things that I can work on, and so I can see myself reflected in these stories as well. And then to piggyback off of what you said, I think one of the most common tropes that I was running into is the trope of found family in science fiction. I love the story of Guardians of the Galaxy, in particular, that first movie. Though you did have a group of people that were hurting and for various reasons, and some of that was family trauma, and that they found each other and did create. And then they, some of these shows are just basically people that work together, and it's more like like Star Trek to me. These are people that get along really well, but they're basically co-workers. But that Guardians of the Galaxy to me took that next step, and these people did feel more like a family. They functioned more like siblings, the good and the bad. Yeah.
So, you kind of carry that out into what do we wish we had? What kind of relationships do I wish I had with my siblings? Do I wish I could create found families and watch it play out the way that it plays out in media?
Yeah, and that's honestly what a lot of us do. I mean, even especially like in fandom spaces, we create our own found family because we may not have the support that we need from the people that we are born to by blood, and I think it helps us to see that reflected in the media that we consume, to say, hey, okay, so it's not weird that I don't have my dad here, or I don't have my mom here, or that I don't get along with my siblings, because you know what? People that I grew up with, I consider like family and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, and plus it's like the whole like convention culture is a thing about like kind of making families. Like any convention you go to, not just Dragon Con, but any other convention, you find like-minded people and they get together and you have things in common, and you become lifelong friends with people that you just met. So I mean, this is kind of a thing that this environment creates another kind of family dynamic as well. So I mean, and then you create family dynamic over your fandom for broken family dynamics.
Do you think that the concept of found family exists more in sci-fi and fantasy media versus other kinds of media? Do you think that's something that resonates with sci-fi fans more so than general population?
It kind of seems like it because like most science fiction occurs in a faraway land, and most people, and they try to create different cultures, so you kind of have you don't really know how to expound on their culture, so you just kind of throw them in with you have one earthling, one kind of humanoid alien, one kind of scaly alien, and then it's like you just kind of throw them all together to see what you get. Then you find out, once you see which ones are more interesting, you kind of build out their family. It's like in Star Trek, a lot of people like Spock, so you kind of built out his Vulcan history and showed his parents and why he's the way he is. It's like, I mean, once you figure that out, it kind of you can build out the family dynamic and show how it impacts his found family.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with that. I think with science fiction and fantasy, whether it's dealing with otherworldly beings or even if you're dealing with like werewolves, you tend to leave your human family and you join a pack. If you're vampires, you have a coven that you belong to. And it's not necessarily, I don't think it's that they're eschewing their regular family, but you tend to gravitate towards people who understand you and who understand what you're going through, especially if they're going through something similar. I mean, there's not too many human families who can sympathize with you turning into a vampire, or you turning into a werewolf, or you know, finding out that your father is an alien. So you tend to gravitate towards those types of people that can help you kind of learn who you are and accept who you are without any judgment, which doesn't always happen in human families. I mean, even with human families now, you have people who are different and their families don't accept them, you know, just because they don't understand, or it's not something that they accept. So I think we just see it more in American sci-fi. Well, not just American, but in science fiction and fantasy in general, just because it's literally so broad. There is no limit to what you can explore with your family in those types of things. Whereas with humans, it's just kind of like, okay, I'll be with this family because they're nice. I don't want to be with this family because they're a jerk. You know, there's a little bit more to kind of be selective about or choose from.
And then the bonds of community, right? Like that's one of the basis of supporting families, the bonds of community. If we focus on community building and problem solving, those are not solo endeavors.
Right.
And so you're focusing on family and found family and building family, and you don't necessarily have the tools at hand to do that with the family that you're given. And so we end up working outside of that box, because if I have a family of 4 people and 2 of us are intellectuals, but I need to build a house, what are we gonna do? Right? Like I need to create a bigger tribe to do these things that maybe everybody in the smaller tribe can't do.
Yeah. I will say that when I think about, I mean, I've been part of the sci-fi community my entire life. I think about shows that we watched when I was a kid versus now. I do see forward movement in a positive way in terms of family support. Like I think about when I was a kid, if somebody was other in some way, like a vampire, werewolf, superpowers, even if they could be something really positive, that was something to be hidden. That was something to be almost embarrassed or ashamed of. It was not understood. It was something to be feared. But I am starting to see more shows where parents in particular are more supportive. Like a show that I watched with my son is a Disney Channel show, Kim Possible. I'm seeing some nods. Loved that show. But as a parent, I loved watching that show because the parents understood what was going on with Kim and was like, you know, just make sure you get your algebra homework done. And I love that for her. I loved seeing that parent support. I mean, obviously that's not all the time, but I am happy that writers are starting to see parents in a more positive way in teaching kids in particular that maybe you can go to family for support. Getting into like other specific tropes with sci-fi, the bad dad and the good mom came up all the time. We have so many moms that are considered to be badasses and a bunch of absentee dads. And I think we could probably do a whole hour on daddy issues alone. But let's talk about some of these amazing moms. Like, do you have favorite moms, mom figures from sci-fi or fantasy?
Mrs. Weasley.
Yes.
Weasley, yeah.
Mrs. Weasley is one of those moms, and not just Mrs. Weasley, but Arthur too. He's one of those examples of a good dad as well, because they already have like a boatload of kids of their own, and they're poor and they're struggling, but they never make it about the struggle. They have love for their children, and even these 2 friends of their sons who just, you know, happen to show up one day and they just embrace them and make them a part of the family, and just instinctively know, okay, this child lacks this at home, so I'm gonna give that to them, and this child lacks this at home and I'm gonna give it to them, but all the while not neglecting their own children. And I mean, I know that when we read the story, sometimes it feels like Ron is being neglected, but that I think comes from one's own self-reflection, that he feels like he's being overlooked as the middle boy, as the youngest boy, and you know, all of these other things. And then he has this really famous best friend that he feels like everyone gravitates towards Harry. But Mrs. Weasley is one of those parents. She just doesn't care if you're a child. It's kind of like for those of us in Gen X and probably older, like we really were raised by our neighborhoods. If your mom was not at home but you were outside playing, all of the other mothers knew where you were. They knew what time you were supposed to be home. They knew what time. They knew your schedules. They knew to take care of you. And if something happened, oh, your mom had to work late, oh, you were covered by the community. And that's kind of what Mr. and Mrs. Weasley do for the children that come through their care. And it's like one of the most delightful things. But she's also that mom that, not my daughter, you know, so yeah.
Not my daughter.
This is a cheat because we were just talking about this, but Maria Rambeau.
Yeah.
Like strong black mom, yes. I was so excited when they really fleshed out her character in the MCU. I've always loved her in the comics. And so to watch her raise a strong child in her footsteps, that there's not this limit on career or what have you, that they are on this upward trajectory, literally, but they are solid and it's super supporting, and intelligence is welcomed and strength is welcomed. And so that's always been one that jumped out at me.
Kind of going off the beaten path, I actually like Elastigirl as a mom. I mean, thinking about how she's dealing with her husband who has confidence issues and can't do what he does best, and he's always moping around the house, and then having to deal with a preteen and a teenager with powers and trying to keep them apart and trying to solve their problems. Like in the first movie, all she was doing that and having Mr. Incredible go behind her back and try to be a superhero again. Then she gets the chance to do it, and in the second movie, and it's like I like the dynamic that she still holds everything together, like despite just being, for lack of a better word, stretched to her limits. And but I really like how she, like, you know, kind of overcomes the problems that she faces in her family and tries still holds everything together.
She was actually the first one that popped in my mind.
I love her. I love how that was developed. I can't wait for the third movie.
Yeah, she when the Incredibles came out, that she was actually somebody that I related to. Not the whole superpower thing, but that whole trying to keep it all together. Like,
right.
You got 15 things in your head at the same time, and I gotta save the world, but I also gotta cook dinner. I related to that.
Yeah.
So I love that.
How many?
Mrs. Brisby. You ever saw Secrets of NIMH? Mrs. Brisby.
Oh, Secrets of NIMH. Mrs.
Oh wow,
Brisby.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
mom.
That was a great callback. I like that.
I was gonna say another one for me is Queen Frigga from the MCU.
Yes.
Because
yes.
you have this mother to these two very, very different sons, and it's like, even though Loki was not hers biologically, until that was revealed to us, we would not have known that, you know. And she never treated them differently. And then even with Loki being kind of the oddball out, or the black sheep, she never talked down to him. She never made it seem like the way that he was that there was something wrong with that. She always gave him love, and it was like, you don't see that a lot in media, particularly when it comes to, you know, we always get this evil stepmother trope. So technically speaking, that's what she was, if you really think about it. But you never look at her that way, because she never treats him any differently than she treats her natural born son.
Yeah, I love that. It's very similar to Ron Weasley in that obviously Loki had some stuff going on, but it did not come from mom.
Mm-hmm.
She loved them fiercely, and they loved her fiercely in return. Yeah, she's great.
You know, I appreciate the idea of considering the mom as the badass, strong mom, because you get so much of, you know, mental health development is the mom caused the problem, right? And so to get the flip side of that, I think is very important, so that not only are we seeing positive mom role models, we're seeing all of the dynamics of those relationships.
Right. And in movies, you get like Sarah Connor's in Terminator. In movies, you have an hour and a half, 2 hours to develop somebody. So no, you're not going to get into their, the emotional availability of their parents when they were kids. We've got to save the world again. When I was again preparing for this panel, Ellen Ripley from Aliens came up all the time because she did such an amazing job of saving Newt. But what is interesting to me about that, because she was on several lists, she was not a mother.
Actually, she is, but it's an extended version. There's a deleted scene where it turns out she has a daughter that was like died while she was in cryo sleep and everything, which actually I think I like that version better because it ties it more into the theme of motherhood and why she's attached to Newt.
They should have left that in there.
I agree. They should have left that scene in there.
Because here I am going, she's not even a mom, and you're like, she is. See, I need to know these things. It does.
That's probably why she comes up on those lists, because a lot of people like that version the best.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So, any other badass moms we want to shout out to?
I'm gonna give a shout out to Queen Ramonda because when you lose children, when you lose a child, that's such a hard thing to do. And after she lost T'Challa, she still managed to keep her head up and try to run a country the best she can, and not allow outsiders to come and steal resources from them and try to hold everything together. And then she still, even though she loved Okoye, she knew that Okoye had messed up, and she just couldn't. And that whole scene was so emotional. Like, she finally let emotions come from her, because she was the kind of queen that kind of held emotions, because she was the mother to her country too, not just to Shuri, that she had to relate to. And so when she finally let it out that, I've lost everything, and you are part of it, so no, you cannot be my general anymore. So I think that was just real. That shows like how a mother is. She can hold it in, but she can only hold it in so long, and she has to release it at some point.
I think one of my favorites from last year was Abuelita or Abuela from Blue Beetle.
Oh yes,
yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And not just a mom, not just a matriarch, but could apparently pick up alien weapons and shoot them.
She has history.
Like that's the genesis of badass right there, right? Like, she's modeling for her family that you can do all of those things. And then the mom character, whose name I don't remember, also just loving and nurturing, and that's, you have this positive family actually, looking at the whole family unit for that movie, and it was just so strong and so important for him to have that family background with the extended relatives too. So you have this unit that is doing so many things and advancing so many things, and such a positive role model on screen.
Can we talk about how it's so good that most stories now allow the families to know the secret identities as opposed to not? Because that was a trope I could not stand. Like, Aunt May in the Spider-Man cartoons was so clueless. I was just like, you can't have noticed that he's just doing his homework. Oh, he's just going through something. I'm like,
but in the comics, it's not like that, depending on which version of it.
Right? Yeah, it's like, but they wanted to show like her just not knowing. I'm like, Aunt May is way smarter than that. I know. That's like good doggone well that she figured out that. It's just like in the Tom Holland ones where she just walks in on it, and I'm like, Aunt May the previous Aunt Mays could have done that like years ago. It's like, I'm glad that, because that's a good family dynamic where the family knows and they try to protect them the best they can. It's like Miss Marvel, like her family knows, like, and they support her even though the mother's still like, do your homework, go save the world, but do your homework first. So it's like, that's the perfect family dynamic with that.
Well, let's give a shout out to good dads in sci-fi and fantasy. You were talking about The Incredibles earlier. I wanted to shout out to Mr. Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things I really loved about him is he gets it wrong. And I love that for him because we get to see the struggle. And we don't always get to see the struggle. It's always this idea of perfectionism, this Captain American-ness, where everything's perfect and wonderful, and it is not perfect and wonderful for Mr. Incredible. So I love that we're getting to see the struggle and him trying, sometimes getting it right, sometimes not. And I really love that about him.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to my earlier talk about Teen Wolf, Sheriff Stilinski. That that dynamic between him and Styles is one of the healthiest father-son relationships I've ever seen on TV. Just the fact that, you know, Styles is always getting into trouble. Yeah, I mean, you can't help it when your best friend's a werewolf, but the way that his father supports him when he goes through his mental health issues, or he goes through these moments where he's unclear about who he is or what role he fits within this friend group, because Styles is the human character, you know, amongst all of these other supernatural type beings. And his father is so supportive, and I remember watching it and I was like, this is one of the most positive father figures I've ever seen on TV. And it was one of those things that really made me fall in love with that show.
Wow. Yes.
One father that, looking back, I think I quite really enjoyed was, I don't remember his name, but the dad from Static Shock.
Yeah.
Like, it's this very calm, nurturing, yet also strong figure, because that was very much like my dad. And I could see a lot of that in my own dad, and just kind of, he has a presence on the show. He's there, and you can kind of sense his care for his children.
I think jumping into that style, Miles Morales, the dad.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
In the universe where we get to keep the dad. Right.
Yeah.
That's a whole different father experience. It's a whole different black father experience.
Right.
It is working class. And I think that's one of the things that gets to me sometimes about a lot of our fantasies, that working class is depicted in a negative sometimes, whereas that was built up as working class is good and it's strong and it was just a good relationships, and then to watch him struggle with identity, and then the uncle even steps in, and that just made it even more interesting, right? But that was one that his dad was something I was really impressed with.
One that's again kind of off kilter is I like Scott Lang as a father. I think that, like, in the first one, you see that he gets out of jail, he's trying to do good, and he goes to see his daughter, and his mother is trying to tell him, like, look, you have to do you have to get better. And he makes a concerted effort to be a better guy and not do crime again. But it's like, when he falls back, or when he finally becomes Ant-Man, it's like, I feel like he's getting to the point where he could be the dad that he needs to be for his daughter. And in the subsequent movies, you see that even in Quantumania, he was just like, even though he felt like he was losing control, he was still like, he was still the father who's trying to be there for her, even though she had gotten a suit and had become a superhero. He still was protective of her, like really trying to be the father and the role model, trying to be the person that she could still look up to and count on. So I kind of like the changes that he went through as far as those movies.
And now I'm sitting here, we have to say Hawkeye, right?
I literally was about to say Hawkeye. I was literally about to say Hawkeye because he is actually one of my favorite Marvel characters. And you know, you have this guy who is the human amongst superheroes, and he takes the beating, he keeps on ticking, and then he goes home and he's this incredibly loving husband and this incredibly involved father. And I really wish that we got a chance to see a little bit more of that. I'm hoping we will see more of that with him, but yeah, he's absolutely.
He's kind of the opposite of the Incredibles' dad in his work-life balance, where Bob is wanting to put that element back in and he misses it, and you get the feeling that Clint is so defined by his family. He wants to help his friends and show up, but he's so into just being a father that when he loses his family, he loses himself, like, completely. That's really.
So I've got a question for Hanako. Let's talk about Rick Grimes.
We don't have enough time in this panel.
Let me get comfortable.
See, because when I was researching this panel, and I'd already thought of him because family is a huge part of The Walking Dead as a show. One list had him as a horrible dad, and one list had him as a great dad. So what are your thoughts?
So, horrible horrible dad, I think, is stretching it, because you have to kind of make concessions for the fact that this is a man in a zombie apocalypse. And so the normal rules that people use to judge good and bad, those are thrown out the window. I literally just got off a Walking Dead panel where we talked about this kind of thing. It's like you don't really have good, you don't really have evil in that type of world, because people are doing what they have to do to survive. Now, as far as Rick being a horrible father, I don't understand how, like, this is a man who would do anything to keep his children alive, including the one that may not be his, you know. And for anyone to have that kind of mindset, to have the circumstances that led to Judith's birth, dealing with all of that, in the midst of dealing with coming out of a coma and finding the world completely different from the way you left it, having to deal with the betrayal of your wife, the betrayal of your best friend, which technically is not a betrayal because they thought you were dead, but still, it's like, psychologically, you're not going to separate all of that. You can try. But when it comes to taking care of his children, he is one of those people that will go above and beyond. I mean, a guy threatened his son and he ripped his throat out with his teeth. I don't know, I'm one who will kill for my kids. I don't know if I could do that. That's like, and I say that because there's a certain animalistic part of our psyche that everyone has, and most people will never tap into it. He is one of those people who will tap into it time and time again if it means keeping his children safe. And I just don't see how people can say he's a horrible dad. Now, granted, I know a lot of the discussion, we've had discussions about Michonne, oh, she left her kids to go find Rick or whatever the case may be, but it's a zombie apocalypse. You can't stay with your children all the time because there has to be people who go out to scavenge. There has to be people to go out and fight. You know, you have to have people to do these things, and to expect the mother to not do it because she has children, I feel like that's unfair. You know, it's one of those things where us as parents, I know a lot of people feel like we feel entitled because, oh, we have children, so we shouldn't have to do this, we shouldn't have to do that. But when people look at them, it's kind of the opposite. Oh, you have children, you shouldn't leave. Why? I still have to make sure that everybody else is protected. So I think he's a great dad. And the fact that he's done the things that he's done, I don't know if anybody is familiar with The Walking Dead or has watched the most recent show where we find out that Rick is alive and the things that he's had to do to stay alive. He did those things to make sure that his wife and children would be protected, that they would be safe. You can't tell me he's a bad dad, period. He may not make all the best decisions, but when it comes to those children, yeah.
Okay. All right. Does anybody want to add anything to that? Okay.
I was going to say, I think he falls under this kind of umbrella of parents who need to lead in difficult situations that we see a lot in science fiction that also have to tend to their children, and sometimes that can be seen as negligence in using his leadership abilities for other people and not his children. But I think that he is one of the characters who does a very good job managing the leadership of other people whilst leading his children as well.
Yeah, because here's the thing, if you focus only on your children and you neglect the other people, if something happens to you, why would those people take care of your children? You know? And it's one of those things where we talk about found family, built family, like that's literally what The Walking Dead is. All of the characters, they have made this found family under circumstances that none of us can imagine, you know, and it's people who probably, if the world hadn't ended, would probably have never crossed paths, probably would never have spoken to each other, never had reason to speak to each other. I mean, think about it. Daryl was the definition of a racist redneck at the beginning of the show. You would not think that he would become like one of the most important people to Michonne and her to him. So it's like if he can't balance between taking care of the people and taking care of his children, one, he's not an effective leader. Two, he's not setting a good example for his children, because this is the world his children have to grow up in now. So you have to show them that, okay, yes, while this is important, we also need to do this, we need to do that. He's actually teaching his children how to grow up in that type of world. Whereas you have some other people who don't.
Okay. I've got a question for Burma. Are you ready?
Sure.
Yeah, I heard that you. Yeah, let's do this. Star Wars. Okay, so we have multi-generational nonsense.
You're putting it lightly.
I'm putting it lightly. I am summarizing when I say there's a lot going on with the Skywalker family. So my question for you is this: Kylo Ren, was he always destined to turn to the dark side from the very beginning, because he never had a shot even coming into this world based on his parents and his grandparents and everything else that was going on before him?
Yes. I think that is, if we look at Star Wars, if the big span of what everybody is doing for the universe and what everybody is growing, and you just happen to have a kid over here, you happen to have a kid over there, and then you don't try and rein in anything that's happening with those kids, what are you going to expect to happen, right? Like you have a kid who doesn't understand his powers, he doesn't understand where he comes from. His dad is not around, like is not doing the things that are supposed to be done. His relationship with his mom is complicated, and she wants different for him than he wants for himself, and she doesn't really care what he wants for himself. She wants him to want what she wants for him. Mm-hmm. So with that you have a person who now, how does he become his own person? It seems like the only way is to break out completely, right?
Right.
The generational weight of the name and the expectations. What does that lead? It leads to greatness and flaming out, which we see, mm-hmm. or it leads to I need to forge my own path, even if it's the wrong path. That would be.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, both his parents are headstrong people who want to go their own way, and both his parents are so used to doing whatever they want that they're sure is right, that becoming a parent is not really their strong suit necessarily. And I just know that because Leia tells us that, and she's like, she and Han are both saying, I do what I like doing, I just go to that. But I mean, she never questions her choices, and that's good because she's right most of the time, but he does. I mean, I like what you said about him. It's like, I'm in this huge shadow of these people in the previous generation. How do I get to be my own person? Although, if you add a little bit of weakness, I think if you give credibility to a huge machine trying to corrupt these people in Star Wars, you can say that's a big factor too. If he hadn't had that particular influence, maybe we could have worked it out. But yeah.
And he was susceptible to that because he needed to find his own space, and that space didn't match with either of his parents' spaces.
Which honestly is so common. Kids oftentimes want to create their own space. They want to differentiate themselves from their parents. It has been so funny. My younger son is in college right now, and even though there's these things he's interested in, he doesn't want to take those classes because mom did, you know. It's so common. It's just in Star Wars that really shook itself on a galactic scale. Yeah, there's a on all the list of bad dads, Darth Vader is number one on that list. But to be fair, he never really truly had a chance to be a dad. And then when he did kind of have that chance to be a dad at the very, very end, he chose correctly. He chose his son over the Emperor. So the bad dad thing with Darth Vader, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that's really true.
I mean, I think that kind of when your dad cuts his son's hand off, it's like
strict structure money.
Yeah, but father's sons, right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's just like taking your son out and playing football and hitting him in the head. Like, all right, get up, dust yourself off. Let's start again. It'll grow back. Rub some dirt on it. It'll be fine.
Just a flesh wound.
But in Empire, when he finds out he has a son, he's still a corrupted Sith. But his version of fatherhood is, you and me, buddy. we're gonna be corrupted Sith together, and that's like the
Teamwork makes the
go-to
dream work.
instantly.
I mean,
Yeah.
is that a bad dad? He just wanted to be with his son.
That's right.
On
Yeah,
the wrong
he
side.
tried to give his son the
Right,
universe. I
right.
mean, what
I
how
mean,
bad could
my
he
dad
be?
never tried to give me the universe.
Right.
So Leia's probably like, run the government with me, and Han is probably like, go be a pirate with me, and Luke is like, go be a loner Jedi with me. And he's like,
Right.
real person.
Yeah, Star Wars gets to be super interesting for me just because a lot of it is just family trauma that's playing out.
On a universal galactic scale.
On a universal
Literally.
scale.
Literally, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But Kylo Ren, like Loki, he acts and postures like he wants to deny his family, but when you get in his face and talk about his relationship with his mom, he
Right.
kind of wants to change the subject. And then when Loki, like, his mom asks him, so am I not your mother? And he's like, no. And then she like looks at him like, I don't even have to argue with you. You know you're lying. I know you're lying. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Kylo's always kind of struck me as that kid who's basically a good kid. Was always the good kid. But for some reason, this is rebellion on a large scale. This is, trying to make a name for himself in a family where everybody's famous. Everybody has done something amazing, good or bad. You know, those are all amazing things. So he's just, and there's no one really around to guide him. As much as I love Leia, she was not really a great mom.
She was a general.
And then Han, dipped. He's not around.
But also, we can't forget the fact that when his uncle was trying to train him and sense the darkness in him, he tried to kill him. That would turn a child.
That'll do it. That'll do it.
Yeah.
That's
So it's like
that's not good.
instead of trying to sit here and say, okay, look, let's figure out how we can overcome this, how we can make sure that this doesn't happen. No, you try to kill your nephew, like no explanation. Yeah, that
We didn't get a chance to explain.
because he was too busy trying to kill him.
Well, he thought about it. If he'd actually tried, he might have done it. But
Yeah.
he thought about it.
And the whole Jedi Order discourages attachment, healthy or.
Oh God, that's a
anything.
whole.
Which
I mean, and I know we don't
Yeah.
have time. But just walking in the door, the Jedi way, really is not psychologically healthy for children to be a part of.
Like it's a forced family. It's like
Forced family.
The name of the book.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, follow this way or else. I mean, you can see it in the Acolyte. It's like if you see somebody trying to stray from the way, you either try to kill them or you kick them out. It's like there's no. They're like, okay, please stop. Okay.
Yeah, there's no compromise.
There's no compromise. There's nothing that's like, maybe I can figure out why you're feeling this way. Maybe we can talk something out. Maybe we can. It's like, I mean, it's ironic that they say only a Sith speaks in absolutes, but
Right.
Jedi speak in absolutes all
Right.
the doggone time.
All the time.
Deals.
So-
Deals and absolutes. It's a huge difference.
Right.
So are the good guys then doing the right thing? Is that
I
the
think-
good
I think
family
it's been
because they're doing
proven-
the right thing?
I think it's been proven in Star Wars that there really isn't a good guy because they both do really bad things, but they also think that they're doing it for the right reasons. So it's like there's not really a good side because they don't really understand how to accomplish their goals without giving a really bad downside to
Yes.
what they're doing.
It's kind of like what they always say: everyone is a hero in their own story.
Absolutely.
So even villains think that they are doing the right thing for the right reasons, even though
Right.
When the villain Loki has a point.
The Jedi don't.
I mean, you were saying that about the villain. I just think about Palpatine, Darth Sidious, and when he said to Darth, I think what he said to Darth Vader, Sith will rule the universe, and now or I guess the universe. He said, and now we'll have peace. So
Right.
it's one of those.
It was a piece.
Right? Yeah. But, he's,
I mean,
Where's the lie?
we'll rule the universe, and now we'll have peace.
I mean, but it depends on your definition of peace. Is like is peace like everybody in servitude doing what you say, or is peace everybody being able to freely express themselves?
Well,
It's
no,
like you
no,
have to get to someone's definition of peace. It's like you can't just say peace.
No, I know. I'm just
No, I get what
from
you're
his,
saying. I get what
from
you're
his
saying,
point
yeah.
of view, just like he said, from
Yeah,
his,
yeah.
you know, his in his mind.
Right. No, I
That's how you
understand.
define peace.
But it's, yeah,
Subjugation or
Right.
you know, freedom.
Right.
So,
of course, yeah. I mean, and that goes back to family. It's like, what kind of family do you want? Do you want a family that freely expresses themselves, or do you want a family that just does what they say, cleans their room, goes to bed, makes good grades, and does what they're supposed to do? It's like, how much leeway and wiggle room do you give the people in your family to be their own person?
And I think about this is a hot take. One of my favorite fathers in the MCU. I never remember his name. Shang-Chi's dad.
Wenwu.
Okay, yeah.
Wenwu. I only know that because of them in the podcast. Wenwu.
One of
You just
my
got to say it over and over.
favorite dads is Wenwu, and he thought he was doing the right things. He was not a good person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he had a family, and that made him want to be a different person. And then he lost his family, and it's like, okay, back to square one. This didn't work out.
Yeah. Right.
But what he wants for his children is their growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So is he bad? I mean, he tried to kill both of them, but is he really?
Outside of that little murder thing, I do love just in general that we're starting to see more complicated people.
Right.
Yeah.
In general,
Mhm.
you know, people that are struggling and getting it wrong. People struggling and sometimes they get it right. Aside from the little murder thing, but I do love that complicated thing because we can see ourselves in that. You know, we're all complicated. You know, what would we do in the world of the wild if we woke up tomorrow and there had been a zombie apocalypse? How would we be? You know, that was so great about those characters is because they were people we knew. They were us. We could see these people on the street. These people we worked with, people in our family. How would we behave? How would we change? How would it change us? You know, all that kind of thing. That's what was great about it. I love the complicatedness of it.
Yeah.
That's why I love sci-fi. It makes you think, you know.
You know, going back to what he was saying about Palpatine, it made me think about another character who, depending on the way you look at it, he could be a good person, he could be a bad person, and that's Omni-Man from Invincible. Because if you think about it, before Mark gets his powers, we see Invincible. I mean, we see Omni-Man as Nolan. He's this loving husband. He's this doting dad, and from everything that we see in season 1 of that show, if Mark had never gotten his powers, he would have continued on that way and not had an issue. He could have, you know, because his lifespan is so long, according to him, it's like, this is just a blip in my life. So, okay, if I have to spend one generation with this one wife and this one kid who doesn't have powers, okay, I can do that, it's no problem. But the minute Mark gets his powers and shows his Viltrumite heritage, it's like a switch flips. And Nolan is all like, okay, so this is what we're doing. The Viltrumites are gonna come, they're gonna take over everything, and we're doing this for your own good because we are the superior race. We can make sure that you guys thrive, but you have to do it under our control. And it's like, what? Where did this come from? But it's one of those things where it's like, he could have been a great dad. He could have been supportive of his son, but the moment that switch flipped, he was all about taking over the humans and killing the human race, and his wife is a pet and all this other stuff, and he just became like evil incarnate.
and then he left and became a dad again to try to figure it out again. It's like he went and got someone else pregnant and had another child. But it's like, do you think that was lashing out when he was like beating him down, like lashing out because was he lashing out in part because he felt like he didn't do a good enough job getting him ready, even though he felt like he had to rush to get Mark ready, but it's like, and he saw it wasn't working, but I felt like he was just getting frustrated and for not being able to do it, and just like kind of lashing out, even though it was very brutal.
I think it was more so he was probably angry because maybe he thought that his connection to his son was more so that once Mark came into his powers, he could just tell him, oh, okay, so you have your powers now, this is what we're gonna do, and you should be okay.
Okay.
But because Mark showed more humanity, I think that's what really kind of triggered him and pissed him off.
Let's talk for a second about Wanda Maximoff and the MCU. It's another one I think we probably spent a while talking about.
At the end of the WandaVision series or in Multiverse of Madness? Because they're so different.
Yes.
Are they?
Yes.
Are they though? I think it's a good question.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
all of
Nate.
WandaVision and then getting into Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. She's an interesting character to me. Because normally that kind of role, that descent into madness, is reserved for men. So, I mean, I love getting to see a woman get to be the villain in that way. But at the same time, I kind of feel like they did her dirty as a character. But Wanda as a mother and that whole journey, what, y'all have any thoughts on that?
Very quick.
2 weeks or something.
I mean, I think she was a great mother, but I think that underneath she was never necessarily a good person when you see how her powers developed in the first place. And so you've got this sort of streak that's not positive underneath everything. And then she becomes a parent, and she's a fantastic parent. And that's an interesting dichotomy too. Like, how can somebody who is not on the up and up still be such a good, loving parent that her sons would never say that she was not a good parent?
Right.
We
How
got-
would, go ahead.
We gotta also look at, she created her first children from grief. Like, this is right after Vision's dead, and this is right after Endgame, where everybody was fighting, and she goes to look for Vision's body, and she sees him splayed on like 5 or 6 tables, and then she literally goes to a town, starts crying, and her energy creates Vision, turns a town into whatever she wants to be, and creates children for her. Like, she actually creates everything from grief, so that's not really a really good place to start creating anything from. So by the time we get to Multiverse of Madness, where she's had to give her children back, she figures out a way with the Darkhold to maybe find them again. So of course she's going to be obsessed with doing something that was built from grief. So then, like, the scene where she slips up and says that she knew who America was, and it switched from the apple orchard to like a dark, like, desolate land. Like, it still chills me when I'm like, oh god. But it's like, she kind of became I don't know, and I wouldn't say she's necessarily a good parent, because she stole another dimension's children from another dimension's Scarlet Witch. So I mean, I don't really see that as, I mean, she's basically a kidnapper. So I don't necessarily see her as being that good.
I guess I'm thinking about how her children felt about her, right? As opposed to the things that she did, because she did a series of terrible things. Like, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse.
Well, I mean, she created them to like her, so it's like that. There's really not no room for error unless they're children that weren't hers from another dimension, where they're like scared of her. Like, who the hell are you? Why are you coming to get me? And you're not my mom. So it's like, I mean, that's kind of where I am. I just don't see her as being a necessary. She wanted to be a good parent, but she stole kids. That's not things that good parents do.
But the thing is, she went to that place in her mind after losing her children. So I don't think that makes it so that, I don't think that makes her a bad parent. But Wanda, we know, has dealt with trauma from a very early age.
Right.
And one of the things about trauma sometimes is that you don't learn how to let go of certain things, and especially for someone like her that has the ability to create an entire existence, again, just from her thoughts, and to have to lose it in the way that she did. Like, you know, you were saying that she's inherently not a good person. Like, we've seen, like, from a young age that that she has a little bit of darkness in her, but that darkness was also manipulated in her. Like, they took a tragedy that happened to her as a child, and they used that to turn her into the person she was. And I think with her children and with Vision, she was able to be the person she probably always wanted to be. And then when that was taken away from her, I think it was probably just too much for her to bear. And, you know, there are a lot of things. I've never lost a child. I don't know what that's like, but I know people who have lost children. There is something that changes in you when you have that kind of loss. So I won't say that she is a bad parent. I won't even say she's a bad person. Like, this is a person who has never learned to deal with her trauma and her grief. And she has a lifetime of PTSD that's just sitting there in the person of one of the most powerful people in the world. How do you deal with that? You know?
Not very well, apparently.
And she doesn't really have anybody to help her, because everybody that she knows is dealing with their own grief and trauma for other things. Like, she had to go through killing him not once. She had to watch him die twice. Then she got snapped. Then she came back and found him in peace. That's a lot for someone to go through and not have time to process.
Right.
So yeah, I can't blame Wanda for anything she's done. She needs some help.
All right, gentleman in the back.
I know the time is limited, so I'm trying to make it quick, but just listening to the whole layout of the trauma and experiences that Wanda had, I am one of the few people who, in a way, appreciated the final season of Game of Thrones for the simple fact that I see some of those same tropes of trauma leading to a different mindset in Daenerys Targaryen.
Yes.
And because of that, you know, and like, just kind of give some perspective on kind of the correlation between the two of them as mothers, even though Daenerys is the mother of the dragon, but still losing two of her children and witnessing losing two of her children too.
And that level of trauma changes your brain permanently, and we don't. That's another piece that we could talk another 3 hours about the effects of complex trauma and how that looks in parenting and life and all of that. But that it is permanent change, and we act like it's not. And so generational trauma, family trauma, the trauma that's imprinted in our DNA, that's very important, and we don't discuss it. Sorry, that's a whole soapbox for me.
You said generational trauma, so Encanto.
Encanto.
We don't talk about Bruno.
We don't.
No.
That's not healthy. Yeah.
We don't talk about Bruno. Yeah. How many people in this room could relate to that song? Like, yeah. Y'all got stuff we don't talk about. Yeah.
My family would be really boring because we don't talk about anything. They wouldn't write a show about my family. We don't talk about it.
So we only have like a minute left, and we haven't really got anything about siblings. Like, did anybody in this panel watch the Umbrella Academy? Yeah. Parts of it, yeah. I thought that was a really fun way to just show. I mean, again, we got like superhero type people, but really relating to each other in a way that my brother and I relate to each other, that my sister and I relate to each other. Do you have any other shows that or movies where that sibling dynamic just hits a sweet spot for you guys?
I'm gonna come back to Shang-Chi.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna prove myself by running an underground fighting gang. It was effective.
I'll go back to Miss Marvel. Just the relationship that Kamala has with her brother. Like, her brother is like, I don't know what's going on, but this is what you want to do. I got you, girl. And yeah, I love that show. Like, one of the most underrated shows, I think. That show was just really good.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate you being here. I want to thank my wonderful panel. Quickly, where else will you be this weekend? Where can we see you? Where can we find you? How can we stalk you?
I'm on the Apocalypse track and this track, so I've got, I guess, 6 more panels. I'm just around.
Okay. All right.
I'm always all over the place. I have, I think, 13 more panels this weekend.
Nice, nice.
So I'll be talking about everything from Umbrella Academy to Outlander to House of the Dragon, and I'll be on this track for a few more panels as
Very cool.
Yeah, one more
And
panel.
Michael?
Let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna be almost in this room and in a couple more rooms. Most of this week. Yeah, I'm gonna be here like most of the time. I got Sci-Fi Classics. I'll be there, and I'll be in the Portland for some reason tomorrow. but yeah, I'll be mostly around the Marriott. So just come holler at me.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.